Delusion of Deserve, Why Belief, Not Hard Work, Shapes Financial Destiny. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. There is a story we are told from our first day of school until our last day of work. Success is a simple transaction. You provide hard work, and the world provides you with wealth and security. The ledger is balanced, the game is fair, and the outcome is directly proportional to the effort you put in. This is a beautiful, comforting, and incredibly useful story. It is also a delusion. We see the evidence everywhere. The brilliant executive with a Harvard MBA who loses everything. The quiet janitor who, through decades of patience, dies with an $8 million fortune. If the simple story of hard work were the only truth, these outcomes would be impossible. They reveal a gap between what we believe should happen and what actually does. This book is about that gap. It is not about working harder or smarter. It is about the invisible forces that have more power over your financial life than your salary or your savings rate. It's about the soft skills, your relationship with greed and fear, your perception of luck, and your definition of enough, that are actually the hard skills of money. The following pages are an exploration of the psychology of wealth. We will not look at spreadsheets or investment formulas. We will look at stories and timeless behaviors that show why your financial destiny is shaped not by the sweat on your brow, but by the quiet, often illogical, beliefs that run silently in your head. Chapter 1: The Janitor and the Executive. When Ronald Read died at age 92, the news of his passing made headlines for a reason that had nothing to do with his quiet life in Brattleboro, Vermont. For decades, Read had worked as a gas station attendant and later as a janitor at a local JCPenney. His friends knew him as a frugal and intensely private man who drove a second-hand Toyota and used safety pins to hold his coat together. What they didn't know was that he held a secret, an $8 million fortune. The discovery stunned his community. How could a man of such modest means accumulate more wealth than many doctors, lawyers, and engineers? The answer becomes clearer when contrasted with the story of Richard Fuscone. A man at the opposite end of the professional spectrum, Fuscone earned an MBA from Harvard, climbed the ranks to become a high-level executive at Merrill Lynch, and was once featured in a 40 Under 40 list of successful business leaders. He lived in a sprawling 18,000-square-foot mansion in Connecticut with 2 swimming pools, a helicopter pad, and an annual house staff bill of over $1.5 million. He had all the credentials, all the intelligence, and a work ethic forged in the fires of Wall Street. Then, in 2008, it all vanished. The financial crisis that Richard Fuscone's own industry helped create forced him into bankruptcy, and his lavish home was sold at a massive loss. The very same year Ronald Read was quietly sipping his coffee and watching his untouched portfolio recover, Fuscone was petitioning a judge for relief. One man had every apparent advantage: education, connections, a prestigious career, and a massive income. The other had none. Yet their financial destinies were inverted. The difference between them was not effort. By any measure, Fuscone worked longer, harder, and in a more complex field. The difference was not intelligence. One cannot succeed at that level of finance without being brilliant. The critical variable was something softer, something invisible: belief. Richard Fuscone operated under a belief system common among the highly successful, that trends will continue and that risk can be managed with intelligence. He used immense leverage, borrowed money, to amplify his bets on the housing market, believing his success was a permanent state he deserved. His wealth, therefore, was fragile, dependent on one specific thing going right forever. Ronald Read's belief system was entirely different. He believed in something far less exciting: time. He bought shares in blue-chip companies like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and J.P. Morgan Chase and did almost nothing else. His secret wasn't a stock-picking formula. It was an unshakable belief in the slow, grinding power of compounding, coupled with a deep-seated humility that prevented him from ever thinking he was smart enough to outwit the market or needed more than he had. His work wasn't clocking in, it was the decades-long psychological endurance of doing nothing. His wealth was not fragile, it was anti-fragile. If financial outcomes were a direct reward for hard work and intellect, these two stories would be impossible. They would be fiction. But they are not. They are a stark demonstration that the trajectory of a person's financial life is guided less by what they do and more by the stories they tell themselves about how money works. The idea that effort is the primary ingredient for success is a comforting one. It's a narrative that powers societies and motivates individuals. But it's also a dangerous oversimplification. To understand why this flawed belief is so pervasive, one must first examine the story society tells itself about success, a deeply ingrained and powerful tale known as the Great Meritocracy Myth. Chapter 2: The Great Meritocracy Myth. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born in 1794 to a poor farming family on Staten Island. With a borrowed $100 from his mother, he started a small ferry service, working with a relentless drive that became legendary. He outworked, outmaneuvered, and outhustled every competitor, eventually building a railroad and shipping empire that made him one of the wealthiest men in history. His story is the quintessential American dream, a man who, through sheer grit and tireless effort, bent the world to his will. It is exactly the kind of story we love to tell. The belief that success is a direct, calculable reward for effort is perhaps the most powerful narrative in modern society. It's a clean, simple, and deeply satisfying equation: input hard work, and you will get a predictable output of success. This idea forms the bedrock of our educational systems, our corporate ladders, and our cultural heroes. It gives us a sense of control in a chaotic world, assuring us that the deck isn't stacked and that the game is fair. If someone is wealthy, it's because they earned it. If someone is struggling, they simply need to work harder. This story is not a lie, but it is a dangerously incomplete map of reality. It's a highlight reel that conveniently edits out the co-stars of success, luck, timing, and starting advantage. Vanderbilt was brilliant, but he was also born at the precise moment in industrializing America needed railroads and steamships more than anything else. Had he been born 50 years earlier or later, his ambition would have collided with a different world, likely producing a different result. The dot-com billionaires of the late 1990s were smart and driven, but they also had the incredible fortune of coming of age at the dawn of the commercial internet. Their success was as much a product of when they were as who they were. The problem with the meritocracy myth is not that it celebrates hard work, but that it makes us blind to the role of randomness. When we believe that success is only a product of our own effort, we become arrogant in victory and crushed in defeat. It fosters an entitlement that leads to reckless risk-taking, because we feel we deserve the upside. It also creates a crippling sense of personal failure when things go wrong, because we refuse to acknowledge that sometimes the world simply deals a bad hand. The delusion isn't that hard work is unimportant. It is essential. The delusion is believing that our effort should produce a linear, guaranteed outcome. It's the belief that the universe keeps a perfect ledger of our hours and ought to reward us accordingly. This expectation is a recipe for frustration and, worse, for terrible financial decisions. We chase hot stocks because we feel we deserve a shortcut, we take on too much debt because we feel entitled to a certain lifestyle, and we abandon sound strategies when they don't produce immediate results, because our hard work isn't being rewarded fast enough. This societal narrative, this grand story of merit, is powerful, but it is only the external layer. It shapes our expectations, but it doesn't fully explain our individual actions. To understand why two people, exposed to the same myth, make wildly different choices, one must look deeper, past the cultural story and into the personal code that quietly governs every decision. We all run on an invisible program, a set of ingrained assumptions and biases that acts as your financial operating system. Chapter 3: Your Financial Operating System. In the early days of personal computing, two users could have the exact same hardware, the same processor, the same memory, the same keyboard, but have wildly different experiences. One might run an operating system designed for complex calculations, another a system built for graphic design. The machine was identical, but the software running quietly in the background dictated its purpose, its capabilities, and its ultimate output. The hardware was just the vessel, the operating system was its destiny. Humans are much the same. Every person runs on a financial operating system, a complex set of background beliefs, assumptions, and emotional triggers that dictates every financial decision. This code is not installed consciously. It is written for us, line by line, by our upbringing. It's the quiet conversations about bills overheard at the dinner table, the way our parents celebrated a bonus or stressed about a broken appliance, the cultural attitudes of our community, and the unique emotional imprint of our own first experiences with money. Most of us never even know this program is running, yet it silently governs everything. Consider two people, both earning $70,000 a year. The first grew up in a household where money was a constant source of anxiety and scarcity. Every dollar was a treasure to be guarded. Her financial OS is written in the language of fear. Her default setting is to distrust the stock market, seeing it as a casino for the rich. She believes all debt is a sin, and her primary financial goal is to accumulate cash in a savings account, where it feels safe. She works hard, saves diligently, and feels a sense of security watching her bank balance rise, even if only by small increments. The second person, earning the exact same salary, grew up with parents who viewed money as a tool for opportunity. His financial OS is written in the language of growth. His default setting is to see the stock market as a vehicle for long-term compounding. He understands that debt, when used wisely for an asset like a home, can be a form of leverage. His primary goal is to put his money to work, accepting short-term volatility as the price for long-term returns. He also works hard and saves diligently, but his savings are consistently deployed into a diversified portfolio. A decade passes. The first person has a respectable amount of cash in the bank, but its purchasing power has been steadily eroded by inflation. She has worked hard simply to tread water. The second person has experienced market downturns that tested his resolve, but his net worth has grown substantially. His hard work has been amplified. The difference in their outcomes has nothing to do with their salary or their effort. It is entirely a product of the invisible software they were running. One OS was programmed for survival, the other was programmed for growth. This internal programming is the most powerful force in your financial life. It determines your perception of risk, your relationship with time, and your definition of freedom. It is the silent architect of your future. You can work 80 hours a week, but if your OS is directing that effort toward a flawed goal, you are merely accelerating in the wrong direction. This reveals a critical distinction that is often missed in the cult of effort, the crucial difference between motion and progress. Chapter 4: The Difference Between Motion and Progress. In the late 1990s, at the peak of the dot-com bubble, a company named WebM burned through more than $800 million in investor capital in under 3 years. The company's ambition was enormous: to revolutionize the grocery industry by delivering food directly to customers' doors. To achieve this, WebM spared no expense. It built massive, state-of-the-art, automated warehouses, each costing over $30 million. It bought a fleet of custom-designed delivery vans. It hired thousands of employees and worked them at a frantic pace. By every conceivable measure, the company was a whirlwind of activity. It was the absolute epitome of motion. In 2001, WebM declared bankruptcy, becoming one of the most spectacular failures of the era. The problem wasn't a lack of effort. The problem was that its underlying belief, that customers would pay a premium for a service that required an impossibly complex and expensive logistical backbone, was fatally flawed. The company had perfected the art of doing something no one wanted at a price they couldn't afford. All of its hard work, all of its motion, was simply an incredibly efficient way to drive off a cliff. This is the critical distinction that the Delusion of Deserve obscures. Hard work creates motion. A sound belief system creates progress. The two are not the same. Motion is the feeling of being busy. It's checking stock prices daily, reading endless financial news, constantly tweaking a portfolio, or working overtime to earn more money that is then spent just as quickly. These activities feel productive. They require energy and time. But they do not necessarily move you closer to your goal. A hamster on a wheel is in constant motion, but it ends the day in the same place it started. Progress, on the other hand, is intentional and directional. It is the result of effort applied to a sound strategy. In finance, progress is often silent and boring. It is setting up an automatic investment into a low-cost index fund and then having the discipline to leave it alone for decades. The initial work is minimal, but it is guided by a powerful belief in compounding and market growth. Progress is spending less than you earn, not through frantic, painful scrimping, but because of a core belief that freedom tomorrow is more valuable than consumption today. The cult of hustle convinces us that motion is the goal. It celebrates the 80-hour workweek and the relentless pursuit of activity, assuming that the sheer volume of effort will inevitably lead to success. But effort is just a multiplier. Multiplied by a sound belief, it creates immense progress. Multiplied by a flawed belief, it creates immense problems, faster. A ship's engine at full throttle is a powerful tool, but if the rudder is pointed toward an iceberg, all that power does is hasten the collision. The most important work is not to make the engine faster, but to set the rudder correctly. This requires stepping back from the frantic motion and examining the underlying beliefs that guide it. Is the goal to look wealthy or to be wealthy? Is the strategy built on durable principles or on chasing the latest trend? Is the effort creating a more resilient future or just a busier present? But even when your beliefs are sound and your efforts are directed toward genuine progress, there is another force at play, one that the myth of meritocracy teaches us to ignore. It is a silent partner in every success and a hidden saboteur in every failure. Every financial story has two authors, the person living it, and the invisible co-author. Chapter 5: The Invisible Co-author. In 1968, the students of Lakeside School, a small private prep school in Seattle, were given a rare opportunity. Thanks to the foresight of a few teachers and the proceeds from a rummage sale, the school acquired a state-of-the-art teletype Model 33 computer terminal. At a time when most universities didn't have computer access, these teenagers were given thousands of hours of programming time. One of those students was a young Bill Gates. He would later admit, "If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft." The story of Bill Gates is often told as a tale of singular genius and relentless work ethic, and both are true. But it is incomplete. His success was a product of his own brilliance, but also of a series of low-probability events, being born in the right era, attending one of the only high schools in the world with a computer, and meeting a collaborator like Paul Allen. His story, like every financial story, was not a solo performance. It was a duet, a collaboration between his own actions and an equally powerful, though silent, partner, luck. Every person's financial journey has two authors. The first is you, your effort, your choices, your discipline. The second is this invisible co-author, the random, unpredictable, and often unacknowledged forces of the world. It's the economic cycle you're born into, the industry that happens to be booming when you graduate, the unexpected medical bill, or the chance meeting that leads to a new opportunity. The delusion of deserve is the powerful urge to take sole credit when the story is going well and to erase the co-author's name from the cover. Believing you are the only author of your success is a dangerous form of hubris. It leads to the conclusion that your good outcomes were inevitable and are therefore repeatable. The investor who makes a fortune on a single speculative stock begins to believe they are a genius, not that they were lucky. This makes them fragile. They take bigger, more concentrated risks, convinced that their skill is a shield against failure. They forget that randomness, which pushed them up, can just as easily pull them down. Conversely, accepting the role of the invisible co-author is a financial superpower. It fosters a deep humility that is essential for long-term survival. When you succeed, you acknowledge that good fortune played a part, which prevents you from becoming overconfident and reckless. You build a margin of safety into your plans, knowing that the world is full of surprises. When you fail, it allows for self-forgiveness. You can analyze your mistakes without being crushed by the weight of the outcome, because you understand that a good process can sometimes lead to a bad result due to factors beyond your control. This resilience is what allows you to stay in the game long enough for your efforts to eventually pay off. Acknowledging luck is not an excuse for inaction. It is not cynicism. It is the ultimate form of realism. It is the wisdom to understand that you control the inputs, but the world has a vote on the outputs. The most durable financial plans are not built for the world we expect, but for the world as it is, a messy, probabilistic system where our efforts are only one part of the equation. Recognizing this allows you to prepare for a wider range of outcomes. But preparation for an uncertain present is only half the battle. The other half requires a profound belief about the future, a willingness to engage in the ultimate act of delayed gratification, planting trees you'll never sit under. Chapter 6. Planting trees you'll never sit under. When the Great Hall of New College, Oxford, was built in the late 1300s, its ceiling was supported by a series of massive oak beams. For 500 years, those beams held firm. In the mid-1800s, an entomologist discovered they had become infested with beetles and needed to be replaced. The college council, facing an immense and costly problem, wondered where they could possibly find oak trees large enough for the job. The college forester had the answer. He explained that when the hall was first built, the founders had also planted a grove of oak trees. For 5 centuries, those trees had been left to grow, with the explicit understanding that they would one day be needed to replace the original beams. The founders who planted the saplings knew they would never see the day of their harvest. They were acting on a belief about a future they would not live to see, providing for a problem that was centuries away. This is the single most powerful financial belief a person can possess, a deep, abiding faith in the future. Your relationship with time is a more potent predictor of your financial destiny than your income, your intelligence, or the hours you work. It is the operating system that runs beneath every decision to save or to spend. A person who sees the future as a terrifying, unknowable void will behave in one of 2 ways. They will either hoard cash, believing it is the only shield against uncertainty, or they will spend lavishly, adopting the mantra that one should get it while they can. In both cases, the underlying belief is one of fear. Money is either a defense mechanism or a fleeting resource to be consumed before it disappears. A person who sees the future as a landscape of opportunity behaves differently. For them, saving and investing are not acts of sacrifice. They are not depriving their present self. They are sending resources ahead to their future self. It is the ultimate act of optimism. It is a profound belief that the person you will be in 10, 20, or 50 years is worthy of a gift from the person you are today. This belief transforms the act of saving from a painful chore into a hopeful act of provision. This is the essence of compounding. Compounding is not a mathematical trick, it is the harvest of a deeply held belief in time. The hard work is not in the daily grind, but in the psychological endurance required to let time do its work. It requires decoupling the effort of saving from the immediate reward of spending. It is the discipline to plant a tree whose shade you may never enjoy. The Delusion of Deserve fights this tooth and nail. It screams that your hard work today demands a reward today. It makes the future feel like a distant abstraction and the present feel like an urgent reality. But the builders of Oxford's Great Hall understood a truth that is easy to forget. The most durable structures are built by those who can envision a world beyond their own lifetime. They worked hard not for themselves, but for a legacy. Their reward was not the finished product, but the belief that it would endure. Even for those who master this belief and successfully build wealth over time, a new and insidious psychological challenge emerges. The finish line you work so hard to reach begins to recede with every step you take, a frustrating illusion created by the tyranny of the moving goalposts. Chapter 7. The Tyranny of the Moving Goalposts. At a lavish party thrown by a billionaire on Shelter Island, the author Kurt Vonnegut was talking to his friend, the novelist Joseph Heller. Vonnegut pointed out that their host, a hedge fund manager, had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly successful novel, Catch-22, over its entire history. Heller's response was simple and profound. "Yes, but I have something he will never have." Vonnegut asked what that could possibly be. Heller replied, "The knowledge that I have enough." This is one of the most insidious paradoxes of financial life. The goal of working hard and accumulating wealth is, for most, to reach a point of freedom and security, a point of enough. Yet, for many, the finish line seems to recede with every step taken toward it. The person who once dreamed of a six-figure salary gets there only to find that their peers are earning 7, and the goalposts shift. The family that finally buys their dream house in a nice neighborhood is soon surrounded by neighbors with bigger houses, and the definition of dream is quietly revised upward. This is the tyranny of the moving goalposts. It is a psychological game, not a financial one. Its engine is social comparison. We are wired to measure our well-being not in absolute terms, but relative to the people around us. As your income grows, your social circle often changes. The things that once felt like luxuries, a foreign vacation, a premium car, organic groceries, slowly recalibrate to become necessities. This lifestyle inflation is a one-way ratchet, and the delusion of deserve is its fuel. The belief that I worked hard for this, so I deserve it, becomes a perpetual justification for the next upgrade, the next expense, the next rung on a ladder with no top. The result is a trap. It is possible to have a net worth that places you in the top 1% of the world and still feel stressed, inadequate, and poor. You can work tirelessly to build a fortune only to find that your own mindset has imprisoned you in a state of perpetual wanting. The reward for your hard work becomes not freedom, but a more expensive set of anxieties. True wealth is not a number. It is the gap between what you have and what you crave. You can close that gap by accumulating more, but you can also close it by wanting less. The second approach is far more in your control. The belief in enough is not a vow of poverty, it is an act of liberation. It is the conscious decision to define your own finish line and refuse to let the world move it for you. Hard work can get you to the goalposts, but only a belief in enough will allow you to stop running and enjoy the victory. Of course, the journey toward that goalpost is never smooth. It is a path filled with volatility, setbacks, and periods of gut-wrenching doubt. These downturns often feel like a punishment, a sign that your efforts were wasted. But a more resilient belief system sees this pain not as a penalty, but as the unavoidable cost of playing the game, the simple act of paying the price of admission. Chapter 8: Paying the Price of Admission. No one expects to get into Disneyland for free. You walk up to the gate, see the price, and willingly pay it. You don't view the $150 ticket as a fine or a punishment. You see it as the fee for a day of enjoyment, the necessary cost for access to the rides and the experience within. You might not enjoy the moment of paying, but you understand it is an unavoidable part of the deal. Once inside, you don't demand a refund every time you have to wait in a long line for a popular ride. The crowds and the waiting are also part of the price of admission. This is a remarkably healthy way to view a transaction, yet it is a mindset that almost completely vanishes when it comes to investing. When the market falls, as it inevitably does, many people who believe their hard-earned savings entitle them to steady gains feel a sense of profound injustice. They see the loss not as a fee, but as a fine. It feels like a penalty for doing something wrong, a punishment that must be stopped. Their instinct is to sell, to get out of the park before the fine gets any larger. A more durable belief system reframes this entire experience. It understands that volatility, uncertainty, and periodic losses are not a fine for playing the game. They are the price of admission. The potential for long-term returns that outpace inflation is the main attraction, the space mountain of the financial world. But the ticket to get inside and have a chance at that ride is the willingness to endure the periods when the value of your portfolio goes down and your stomach is in knots. It is the fee, not the fine. Thinking of it as a fee changes everything. When you see volatility as the cost of entry, you are less likely to be surprised or angered by it. You can budget for it, emotionally and financially. You understand that the fee is what keeps the park from being completely overrun. If there were no risk, there would be no reward, because the flood of money would push all future returns down to zero. The fee is what creates the opportunity. This belief is the difference between an investor who panics and one who persists. The person who sees a 20% market drop as a fine thinks, "I've lost 20% of my hard work. I need to get out before I lose more." The person who sees it as a fee thinks, This is the price of admission I knew I would have to pay eventually. It's unpleasant, but it doesn't mean the ride is broken. This mindset allows you to survive the inevitable downturns and stay invested long enough for the magic of compounding to work. The delusion of deserve whispers that your effort should shield you from this fee. It tells you that you deserve a smooth, upward ride without any lines or breakdowns. But the market doesn't care about what you deserve. It is a powerful, chaotic system that offers incredible long-term rewards, but it demands a price from everyone who enters. The most successful participants are not those who find a way to avoid the fee, but those who willingly pay it. Even for those who accept this price, another powerful distraction can pull them off course. It is the nagging, persistent feeling that others are enjoying the park more, riding better rides, and paying a lower price, because someone is always playing a different game. Chapter 9. Someone is always playing a different game. During the height of any speculative mania, from dot-com stocks in the late 90s to cryptocurrencies 2 decades later, a familiar story unfolds. A person who has spent years diligently saving and investing in a sensible, diversified portfolio watches their neighbor, a person who took a wild gamble on a hot, unproven asset, get fabulously rich in a matter of months. The diligent saver did all the right things. They worked hard, lived below their means, and followed a sound plan. The neighbor simply bought a lottery ticket that happened to hit. Suddenly, the diligent saver's discipline feels like a fool's errand. The patience that was once a virtue now feels like a weakness. The delusion of deserve kicks in with ferocious intensity. I work harder than they do. I am smarter than they are. I deserve those kinds of returns. This feeling is the single most powerful destroyer of sound financial plans. It is the siren song of social comparison, and it leads countless people to abandon a winning strategy in order to play a game they are destined to lose. The fundamental mistake is assuming that you and your neighbor are playing the same game. You are not. The person building long-term wealth through diversified investing is playing a game of endurance, like a marathon runner. Their goal is to finish the race with certainty, and their strategy is built on pacing, consistency, and avoiding injury. The person speculating on a volatile asset is playing a game of speed, like a 100-meter sprinter. Their goal is to achieve a massive return quickly, and their strategy involves taking on an enormous risk of catastrophic failure. Comparing the marathon runner to the sprinter makes no sense. You would never tell a marathoner at mile 3 that they are losing because a sprinter has already crossed the finish line. Their finish lines aren't even in the same stadium. Yet this is what we do with our finances every day. We see the highlight reel of someone else's victory without understanding their goals, their timeline, their tolerance for risk, or the role that pure, dumb luck played in their outcome. This is a trap. The moment you start measuring your success by someone else's, you have ceded control of your own emotional well-being. You are letting them define your finish line. A professional sports team that spends the whole game watching the scoreboard and trying to copy the other team's flashy plays will lose its own discipline and strategy. The teams that win are the ones who believe in their own playbook and execute it relentlessly, regardless of what the other team is doing. The only sustainable path to financial success is to define your own game. This means writing down your own goals, understanding your own time horizon, and building a set of beliefs that allows you to stick to your strategy through thick and thin. It is the conscious act of ignoring the noise, no matter how tempting it is. But this is easier said than done. These beliefs, the urge to compare, the feeling of entitlement, the sting of envy, are deeply ingrained. If they are the software that is running our financial lives, how can we possibly change the code? It isn't a matter of simple willpower. It requires a deliberate and conscious process of rewriting your own history. Chapter 10. Rewriting Your Own History. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, two brothers, both in their late 20s, lost nearly identical sums of money they had recently invested. It was their first real experience with the stock market, and the loss was a painful sting. A decade later, their financial lives had diverged dramatically. One brother never invested in the stock market again. He told everyone the story of how he was burned, how the system was rigged, and how his hard work was stolen by Wall Street. His financial narrative was a story of victimhood, and his resulting belief system kept his money in low-yield savings accounts, perpetually losing ground to inflation. The other brother told a different story. He described the 2008 loss as the most valuable, cheapest tuition I ever paid. He saw the event not as a theft, but as a visceral lesson in risk, diversification, and emotional control. His narrative was one of education. This belief allowed him to re-enter the market with newfound wisdom, eventually building significant wealth in the following decade. The event was the same, the story they told themselves about it was different. And the story determined everything. This is the key to changing your financial operating system. Your beliefs are not fixed, unchangeable code. They are stories. And stories can be edited. You cannot change the past events of your life, but you have absolute power over the narrative you construct around them. This is not about lying to yourself or engaging in blind optimism. It is about consciously choosing which lessons to extract from your experiences. A period of financial struggle can be remembered as a time of humiliating deprivation, a story that fosters a lifelong scarcity mindset. Or, it can be reframed as a period of intense resourcefulness, a story that builds a belief in your own resilience and ability to thrive on less. A failed business venture can be a narrative of personal failure, proof that you don't have what it takes. Or, it can be the story of acquiring an invaluable education in market dynamics, making you a wiser entrepreneur for the next attempt. This rewriting process is an active one. It begins with curating your inputs. The stories you consume from the world become the raw material for the stories you tell yourself. If your information diet consists of get-rich-quick schemes and social media feeds designed to provoke envy, your internal narrative will be one of inadequacy and impatience. If you consume stories of resilience, of businesses built over decades, of investors who succeeded by weathering storms, you build a library of more useful scripts. It also requires you to become a more intentional storyteller. When you speak about your financial past, choose your words with purpose. Frame your journey as one of learning and adaptation, not one of luckless misfortune. Your beliefs are simply the stories you have told yourself on repeat until they feel like facts. To change the belief, you must change the story and repeat the new version until it becomes your default. This is the ultimate form of control. You cannot control the economy, the markets, or the actions of others. But you can control the narrative. By rewriting your history, you are not changing the past, you are liberating your future from it. You are consciously building a new belief system, one that will serve you better. For in the end, the world does not give you what you deserve for your hard work. It gives you the outcome of your behavior, which is dictated entirely by your beliefs. The final truth is that what you deserve is what you believe. Chapter 11: What you deserve is what you believe. The most important financial work a person does happens in the quiet moments, when they are not working at all. It happens in the shower, on a long walk, or in the dead of night. It is the silent, internal work of forging and reinforcing the beliefs that will guide all their future actions. This work produces no immediate income and earns no praise, but it is the highest leverage activity of all. The journey through the financial world is not a race to see who can work the hardest. If it were, the janitor Ronald Reed could not have triumphed over the executive Richard Fuscone. Hard work is a commodity, a raw ingredient available to nearly everyone. But like any raw ingredient, its final form depends entirely on the recipe it is put into. That recipe is your belief system. The delusion of deserve is the comforting but false idea that the world keeps a perfect ledger, rewarding every hour of effort with a predictable unit of success. But the world is not a clean accounting book. It is a messy, chaotic, and probabilistic system. It is a place where luck can trump effort, where timing can be more important than talent, and where the most destructive risks are the ones you never see coming. To navigate this reality, you don't need a more complicated spreadsheet or a more frantic work ethic. You need a more resilient set of beliefs. A belief in the power of time allows you to plant trees you will never sit under, harnessing the slow, silent magic of compounding. A belief in the role of luck fosters the humility to save for a future you cannot predict, and the resilience to forgive yourself when things go wrong. A belief in enough draws a finish line on the endless field of social comparison, creating a form of wealth that no amount of money can buy. And a belief that volatility is the price of admission, not a fine, gives you the emotional endurance to stay in the game when everyone else is running for the exits. These are the forces that truly shape a financial destiny. They are the invisible rudders that steer the ship. All the hard work in the world, all the rowing, is useless if the rudder is pointed toward the rocks. Your financial outcome will not be the sum of the hours you worked. It will be the long-term consequence of a handful of behaviors you can repeat for decades. And those behaviors, patience, consistency, a healthy skepticism, and the ability to delay gratification, are not products of effort. They are the physical manifestation of your deepest held beliefs. In the end, the world does not give you what you deserve. It gives you what you believe. It hands you the outcome of your actions, which are born from the stories you tell yourself about how money, risk, and satisfaction work. The ultimate financial skill is not the ability to earn more, but the ability to believe better. Take care and be well.